Okay, no sacred Hebrew music, just straight into it. See how I sorted my playlist out? All
Very
good.
good.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you, Mike.
Well, good to see you guys. We missed last week. That was my fault. Sorry about that. But we're back, and we've got a cool idea to talk a little bit about. Well, why don't you go ahead and give us a bit of an intro as to why you want us to deal with this particular thing, Andre?
Right. So, someone I know was listening to a set of lectures by Gary Williams. He was just interested in, I think they were teaching on Noah. And
Who's Gary Williams?
So Gary Williams is, I was getting there. I was going to get there.
Okay.
Just give me some space.
Yeah.
Give me some
Sorry,
time.
my mind's orderly. I do it in the proper order, but you carry on.
Thank you. Well, anyway, and he was looking for some talks on Noah. And so he went onto the Pastors Academy website where I think someone had recommended to him some talks on Noah by someone named Gary Williams.
Fair enough.
Now, the Pastors Academy is what was formerly called London Theological Seminary. It's basically the kind of conservative reformed, it's the Reformed Baptist Seminary, of the UK. It's the famous one,
We've got a guy
and to be honest, it had kind of been like my dream to study there. It used to be called the master's program used to be called the John Owens Center.
I remember you talking about that all the time.
Yeah, I've still got the bookmark, that I use. I keep in my Bible because it was like I was like, I gotta get you. So I've got a huge amount of respect for the Pastors Academy and a huge amount of respect for Gary Williams, who's a bit of a gun, and he is the principal of the Pastors Academy. So
the Reverend Dr. Gary Williams.
Yeah. No, I've enjoyed the stuff that I've read by him, and talks and lecture things that have popped up from time to time. So, and I think he does. You can see that he's a good speaker and a good handler of scripture from the talks.
Good lecturer. Yeah.
Good lecturer.
A little bit British,
but
for my liking.
You see, I love
He's
it.
like,
love the
chaps. Yes, we're going to look at Meredith Klein. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, oh boy, how long? Is it over yet? Oh, so bored. So bored.
Like I understand that from someone as American as you, Mike. This might sound.
You put it on like double speed, and then it goes. Like Americans have a bit of a slang slur thing that kind of works well on double speed, but British guys they just go.
It sounds.
It just gets
Everybody
too jerky.
loves it. What are you talking about?
No. I don't know. And then you put it back to normal speed, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna pull my eye out because it's so boring.
Well, to be fair, people are putting us on double speed right now.
That's fine. We work well on double speed, except for our intro song.
I just do the plus 30 second skip.
Yeah. 30 seconds.
The 30 second skip is a way better plan. Yeah.
Yeah, one time. Anyway, so he's in at some point. I don't know. It seemed like it was quite a while ago now.
2017, I think the dates that I saw.
Okay.
Really?
He put out
2020.
Nah, it couldn't have been because you had to scroll it was like 2 pages ago.
Oh, okay, no, it's
2013 conference.
2013 conference, yeah, but it's uploaded on 2020. Yeah, okay, cool.
There you go.
Yeah, you had to scroll back away to find it, but anyway, I looked it up, and he did 2 lectures on the Noahic covenant as a part of the kind of covenant theology thing, and in particular on whether or not the Noahic covenant is a common grace covenant. And so I listened to it, and I thought actually,
although he doesn't, he says everyone's okay with it being a common grace covenant. The issue is just, is it redemptive as a common grace covenant?
I thought he was saying that he recognizes there's common grace there, but it's a redemptive covenant.
Right. Yeah. No. As long as we're making that clarification, that's fine. Yeah.
So he's not denying common grace.
Yeah, and it's a deep engagement with Van Druenen's book, Living in God's Two Kingdoms.
Yeah. Deep's a bit of a stretch there, Nick.
Yeah. What I mean
it's an engagement.
The main topic of discussion is he's basically aiming at one book, taking on one argument, and wanting to hammer it out. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, and to be honest, it is probably one of the better engagements I've come across on it. it was the least straw man engagement. I was a bit worried in the first talk because it started off and I was thinking, no, man, you're missing the entire thing about there being two covenants. And then in the second talk, I think he pulls out more sophisticated arguments. So anyway, so to me, it was one of the best engagements of the subject. And given that this is like our thing.
Can you give us a quick rundown on the second talk? Because I think Nick and I both bailed on the first.
Guys, I sent you the link to the second.
Yeah, well, I only got through the first. I didn't have time for the second.
We wanted to do the first, and we're like, I don't know, dude. This is so crazy. But I've got some thoughts. But like, it'd be good to know where he goes in the second. I mean, obviously we can't launch this massive full-on response if we haven't listened to it all. But it just as a matter of discussion.
I haven't got any notes.
Why did you find it compelling? Why did you find it compelling?
Well, I don't know if I did find it. It's not like it changed my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But
why did you feel it was a good engagement? Where was the sophistication of the argument? Just from a knee-jerk response,
So he gets into the kind of nitty-gritty of the redemptive aspects of the covenant, and he does engage with the fact that Van Drunen does acknowledge in the second talk. He sort of engages with the acknowledgement that there are redemptive features and even a redemptive covenant, but he just disagrees exegetically.
Okay.
And he basically takes the argument, the principles of the argument, and he shows how if you applied that to other areas of scripture, it wouldn't work. And so, at that level, he's basically taking a step back and he's looking at the kind of the assumptions behind the exegesis, and he's saying that those assumptions were wrong. Right. And at that level, I thought actually, even though, again, I'm not sure I was entirely persuaded by it, and I'm not sure it was entirely, it was weird. I sort of went through moments where I thought, okay, he has understood this. And then other moments where I thought, okay, well, why? It's like he understood it. When he sets up Van Drunen's view at the beginning, it seems pretty accurate. I was like, yeah, okay, that's fair.
I agree.
He seems to be being fair and everything. Mm-hmm. But then when he starts to attack it, it's like he just wasn't engaging with the stuff that he had said about Van Drunen's view. And the whole first talk was basically like that. The whole first talk, I was just like, well, okay, your second point maybe, but it's like, it's not even like a major argument from my memory of Van Drunen. So he was kind of like picking on a sub-argument, and whether it's true or not, honestly, wouldn't determine a huge amount. And the first argument was just a total, well, hang on a second, nobody's denying that there's anything, nobody's denying that there's something redemptive going on in Noah. And so that whole first argument just kind of fell flat. But the second argument dug a little bit deeper, which is, so the second talk was the main one, which I think I did indicate in my message to you guys.
No, fair enough. Okay, so one of the things that so here's what I'll say up front. We don't necessarily want to go after anyone that's got an opinion about Klein, and definitely don't want to start. I mean, every now and again, an interesting article pops up, and it might be worth engaging, or some good talk. And so I suppose I went into it just looking at that link, thinking, well, maybe we'll look at it, maybe we won't. Let me just give it a listen at that first round. And I suppose one of the big things that popped out to me is not so much a desire to kind of respond and engage with his argument, as much as just the point that I felt that he drew out in his response, that I feel is that we could just develop positively anyway, that would be helpful for anyone listening to this podcast. So I mean, you guys can go, if you're listening to this, you can go and look at it. It's I'm not going to put the link on. Come on,
Pastors Academy,
just Google it, you'll get that.
If you go to the Pastors Academy podcast and you scroll back like a few pages, you'll see that there's Noah and the
old school
covenant, or
just type it up in Google, Noah and covenant theology, Gary Williams, you'll get it. Just go there.
Gary with double R.
Double R,
like Harry but with a G.
There we go. So that's our plug for Gary Williams for the day. My goodness. Anything else you want to say about him, Nick? I mean, you're spelling his name out for him.
Well,
Williams is
telling
two
people
L's
to
as well.
search properly.
All right, search properly. Go check it out if you're interested. But you don't have to. The idea is that's what we've been listening to and engaging with. You don't have to check it out, but if you want to, there it is. Right now, in terms of what I thought we could do, which is perhaps just more interesting for those who are kind of tuning in for a bit of a Kleinian dose, or basically just wanting to keep nurturing that Kleinian system. It won't be any surprise that Van Druenen's quite a big, two kingdom proponent guy, and relies heavily on Klein. And often in the past we've mentioned that for a great little summary of covenant theology, and really Klein's covenant theology, go to Two Kingdoms, his Living God's Two Kingdoms, that little popular book that he wrote. And the first half is just worth its money on its own, right? Just to read that first half. It's just a great little abbreviated summary of covenant theology, and no matter what you do with the Two Kingdom thing afterwards, and then the second part does go into how that applies for Two Kingdoms. So I really suggest, I recommend that book wholeheartedly. I love it. Van Druenen's like, I don't know, he's a very lucid writer. Sometimes like on the bigger works, it gets a little bit too, I don't want to say stilted, but it's like it's quite formulaic. And,
moves away from the big picture into the finer analysis.
He gets quite fine, and he's always very lucid, and I appreciate that about him. But it sort of lacks that poetic sort of carry along sometimes that you feel in reading in writings like Klein and perhaps Horton and so forth. But anyway, not to give him some sort of random literary critique there. Go and check that book out, because obviously that's what Gary Williams is looking at as well. Now, one of the things for us though is that it's important that, and Gary Williams opens up with this question. This got me buzzing, because I thought this is a good thing for us to kind of chew through. He opens up with the question, how does Noah feature in your system of theology? You might not have put it in those exact words, but something like that. Is that more or less right from what you guys remember?
Yep.
How does Noah
fit into your theology? Yeah.
And I like the way he used the idea of just your system, and then he gave a few sort of examples of those who would think like, what the heck, why are you even asking that question? What a random, not relevant for missionaries and church planters. So I really resonated with all of that opening, because he's feeling it. He's seeing that, oh my goodness, if you take this path, this is big in terms of cultural engagement, in terms of mission, the church's spirituality. So he's really feeling that point. And he's obviously going in the different direction to me or to us, but he's driving the point home as we would want to drive it home. And it is important for you to ask the question of how Noah features in your covenant theology, or how your system of theology. And he he does, I think what I appreciated about it as well was that he does mention that the debate gets ugly, and that's not his intent. It isn't, he said Van Druenen very clearly is part of the Reformed team, and so he's not wanting to push it in that direction. And so all nasty comments to proceed after this must be taken in light of intramural debate.
No, I think that was really important, the way that he situated the discussion clearly within Orthodox Reformed thinking.
And trust me, that does not always happen.
No, and there were a couple of moments throughout the talk where he kind of like pauses, and he's like, if we were in America right now, you'd be setting fire to the benches at the back, and you could tell the British students are just not getting it. Like what yeah, okay, what's the big deal?
Right.
And it is, I mean, it is a reminder as well that Reformed thinking in the UK and Reformed thinking in the States does have different emphases.
We're in different places in terms of the culture wars, and are we taking
exactly?
If we talk about taking culture back, then Two Kingdoms doesn't fit into that. That's the wrong language for Two Kingdoms.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Just if you think about America and even the plausibility of theonomy and so forth, it just as we've spoken about this before, but like in New Zealand, it's just like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah,
like,
it's not even an option.
But
no even point. Yeah.
But I think the UK is an interesting.
You can one kingdom all you like. It's not going to do.
Right, but I think the UK kind of like you've got this weird sort of king and king above the church
queen,
kind of thing.
We've got the queen.
Yeah.
The queen,
one duke and duchess less. Yeah.
It's just that Anglican vibe that isn't
We're not
theonomy.
unhappy about that.
Sorry, we've got a bit of a drag on the internet tonight. But so just wait till I finish talking is what I'm saying, Andre.
Yeah, well, Nick and I we're riffing a bit.
Right.
You can't
King,
wait for that kind of thing. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
You went
Apologies. Okay. So, did you
So you were
Did you
saying,
guys
Mike?
see that? Did you guys see that remark? That 5-star review that we got about us being kind of douchey.
So you can't say douchey on the internet. It's a bad word.
Well,
Yeah, it's offensive. I'm offended.
I didn't say it. I'm just repeating it, right? Like,
Yeah,
so like
I
they
just
like
have a
us, but
question.
we're kind
Did
of
the
douchey.
guy who said that we were douchey, did the guy who said that we were douchey, did that guy know you? Because
No.
that for me would.
I'm
no.
sorry if I'm offending you right now and you said it, but I don't think I know you.
I like to think of it as douche. It sounds better in
Douche,
French.
yeah, that's right.
Well, I mean, my thought was like, what does he mean by douchey though? Does he mean like Nick douchey, or does he mean like Andre douchey? You know, because like that's a different kind of douchey. And the
Maybe he
thing
was
is,
just using it as an umbrella term.
because it's like I don't know, because like douchey can be kind of I don't know. In my mind, it could be like you're an arrogant jerk, you know, or it can be kind of like you're kind of clumsy douche, you big
Like
douche.
these
Like a doofus.
these like old grandpa type guys who just like think they're real funny but aren't.
It's exactly yeah. So what kind? Unveil yourself, man. What kind of douchey
Yeah.
are we?
Be more
You know?
constructive with your feedback.
Seriously, we need to work on our douchiness. You know, killing me over here. All right.
Yeah. Oh, no. It's
Anyway,
okay. I only cried for 3 days.
it's like our only rating on the internet, and we're called douches.
No. But they still listen. So, our douchiness works for us somehow.
Bro. All right. So coming back to this whole thing with, he is taking it from a kind of British standpoint. That's interesting, and you've got all sorts of things to think about there. But just thinking further about his whole take on Van Drunen, he basically hones in, he zeroes in on Van Drunen as this like two kingdom advocate based on Klein, which is kind of interesting. I can't help but find that, it's classic. This is why I've kind of done the research that I've done, because it's kind of, he's basing it on this presupposition. If you guys, I don't know if you guys watched the thing with Gregory Baus that we did the other day, which is kind of, just a conversation like that, no matter what you make of it, really shatters that presupposition at some level. At least it leaves a bit of a question mark over, what to what degree is this whole thing, Kleinian, as Van Drunen has put it forward. But he sort of seems to presume all of that and go forward with it. And in his whole process of thinking about the Noahic covenant, which is, rightly Van Drunen's big advance and field as he works it out in terms of natural law and so forth, he starts to kind of, critique the position. And I agree with you, and I think it was I didn't disagree with anything he was saying about Van Drunen, so I didn't
Represented the view well. No straw men. Yeah.
I appreciate that. There's always a good start, even if it gets undone later on, it's just good, to begin that way. And so not wanting to, necessarily not do him the same courtesy and sort of just start critiquing him without even, viewing both of his little talks. Just taking that question, what has Noah to do with your covenant theology? What is the place of Noah? One of the things I noticed in the first talk, and maybe he does go back on this or kind of make this a bit more convincing in the second talk, but is that it seemed to me that he falls into the kind of trap that I've seen over and over again, just in the various readings. So this is why it resonated so deeply with me. When people critique Van Drunen as a kind of Kleinian proponent, what often happens is they just do not put him in context to the greater Kleinian system. Leaving aside the question of whether Klein necessarily leads to Van Drunen's two kingdom thing or some more moderated position, even so, like, just to think about Van Drunen, who's operating on this Kleinian system, basically, to just talk about the Noahic covenant in a way that's detached from the covenant of works, the covenant of grace, the covenant from eternity, just the way that Klein brings it all together,
I
it's
don't
just
even think he mentioned the covenant of works. I don't remember one reference to it.
he does in relation to the issue of justification. He sort of alludes to it. He says, well,
Yeah.
to the degree that we sort of see this as the work of Christ, and then he sort of makes the comparison to holiness and says, well, Christ has earned our holiness, but we're kind of in
Yeah,
Christ and
but he
holy.
doesn't speak of Adam being situated
No.
in the covenant of works and the reference to how dominion plays into the covenant of works.
Exactly. And that's the big issue, because if you don't start with the issue of what Adam was called to do, then it's going to be fuzzy from that point on. You've got to start with the concrete, like what is the reference point for everything we're thinking about in terms of Christ as the second Adam. So then you're asking questions like, okay, well, what is Adam supposed to do? Is he to bring in a new humanity and completely subdue the earth and bring in the eschaton, through his subduing of, like, having absolute mastery of his domain, and thus earning heaven, essentially? I mean, is that true or not? Because that's like everything, in the question. So yeah, it's a real omission if he doesn't go there in the second talk. But even if he doesn't, that's the point I want to bring out anyway. Any critique of Van Drunen is not going to stand unless you look at it in terms of that system, starting with the covenant of works. You have to talk about that. It's interesting. Just I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure Gregory, the guy I spoke to in the last episode, if someone was listening, I'm sure you won't mind me mentioning this, but this is kind of an interesting point, because one of the things that I know that he is not as sure about, or doesn't feel as convinced about, is the relationship that Klein advocates between the dominion mandate and the covenant of works. So you can understand how that would give him a little leeway to kind of work with Doivit, and to the degree that you've sort of latched on, as Van Drunen has, to Klein's position that the covenant of works is the dominion mandate. They're one and the same thing in terms of short range and long range goals. Then you're kind of stuck on this point, and you're gonna need to define this carefully as you think about anything going on from that after the fall.
Yeah.
Can you just unpack that a little bit more, like in terms of the dominion mandate being the covenant of works? So
right,
and in terms of the goals and the outcomes, just lay it open for a second.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, you've got Adam in the garden, right? And he, and just to give you a quick little, protological eschatology, the thing that could have happened but didn't, the thing that Adam was tasked to do. He's in the garden. He's got a priestly mandate, right, to protect Shema, the garden, crush the head of the serpent as he encroaches and so forth. Fails to do that. But that was his short range requirement. That was the kind of one act of righteousness in standing for the Lord against the serpent. Should he have passed that probationary test, he wouldn't have immediately, that's not the eschaton happening at that point. That's not like the end of story moving into the consummation. Then he would have been brought into a state in which he would have been able to then proceed with the building of megapolis, as Klein calls it. This, and who knows how long history would have lasted at that point, but he's basically bringing into creation a new humanity. That's what's happening. So just think, like, again, the reference point here is the second Adam. He's bringing into creation new humanity. He's building the temple city to its full capacity, and then the end comes. And this via God's own doing, through this consummation flash, this epiphanic flash, as Klein calls it, he brings into all the scaffolding falls away, and everything that was created that was intended to move into the eschaton goes through, and so it continues from that point, I suppose, in a similar way to the way we see our eschatology working out. The only difference there is that, of course, all things are not united under Christ at that point, and it's kind of the eschatology that never was meant to be in that sense. And so you've got to.
And some of that won't be new. Some of that is classic Van Til stuff, isn't it? With the covenant of works, that where kind of creation wasn't the end goal, but
to the degree, I'm not entirely sure where Van Til stood on that exact point, but certainly with Voss or Bavinck or who else? I don't know. You've got Friedebos. They all speak of this in some way, shape, or form, and in that sense, it reflects a Dutch brand of of kind of.
I think Van Til said it, but somebody else can correct me. If anyone's listening to this and I've angered them by my Van Til reference,
in general,
feel free to
you
point
just
it
don't
out.
want to say anything about Van Til ever.
Yeah, I don't want to go there.
Because
I
Van
heard.
Til
Well, I was
is a
listening.
cult
I was
on its
reminded
own.
of this because I was. Yeah, I was listening to Reform Forum, and they were drawing out this exact point. So I feel confident in my assertions.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised at all because
the
Van Til
authority
is,
of Reformed Forum.
Yeah, Van Til is in that realm. I mean, he's working with this whole idea. So I wouldn't at all. I don't think Klein's shot out on his own. But it is true that Klein develops this protological eschatology in ways that other guys don't. So I think that's his unique contribution. But he's not in principle moving away from something that's been quite established. But anyways, coming back to the point though, with this whole this issue. If you critique Van Drunen's view, which is really, it has that in mind, right? This is he's got the starting point, he's got the reference point, he's got the in-between point, the penultimate phase of the Noahic covenant. He's got all of this going on, and to just deal with Van Drunen as he does, based on some sort of little, almost a truncated section there of the Noahic covenant, it's just not going to work, and you're going to end up messing up the critique. As I think it started sounding like he did that, and again, leaving. Yeah,
but can I just push back on that a little bit, because I think that's there's a bit of a balance, isn't there? Because any system that's worth its salt has to have legitimate touch points with exegesis.
Yeah.
So if one of the key exegetical moments or undergirdings of Van Drunen's system is his exegesis of the Noahic covenant, and surely you can critique that exegesis.
I think
in
you
and
can
of itself and say.
But I didn't in that first lecture. Didn't hear any compelling or any exegesis. I don't think at all. But any compelling exegesis, certainly concerning.
Yeah. All he did is he referenced the fact that Van Drunen acknowledged that Noah was like a type of Adam. Right. And then what he did is in a very gentlemanly manner, he tried to show how inconsistent Van Drunen was with his own assertions. Exactly. He tried to show that if Noah is a type of new Adam, that means he's also been given dominion. And then he quoted that verse, where there seems to be a reinstitution of the dominion mandate. Yeah. And therefore, there must be a redemptive dominion kingdom moving forward.
Right. So he's the one moving into this conceptual argument, based on the greater system, in order to prove his point. Now, again, no reference to the second talk, but at that level, if he had just left it there, let's say, and I've heard this before, and so I'm really thinking less of this particular critique and more just of that general process of, don't you understand that it's possible for us to kind of be partakers of the Adamic Commission without necessarily getting in the way of the second Adam, and it doesn't make any concrete reference to the system that Van Drunen is really pushing, or Klein's really pushing. So I think anything that's got to come at it like that has got to come at it at a conceptual level to some degree. But I agree with you that in terms of exegesis, I mean, it's true, every system has to have its touch point, it has to work, and I think Klein's done a stellar job in providing that. If anything, he's where dogmatics got a little out of hand with Reformed theology prior to Klein. I think Klein really brought it home and just said, okay, well, here's why I think a biblical theological analysis of the covenants actually do bring out the system of covenant theology. But just in case we get too abstract after this, let me just say, anyone that deals with Van Drunen's argument has to deal with the covenant of works in the garden with Adam and the dominion mandate as it wraps up into that. They have to talk about that. Secondly, what I did notice in this first talk, and I don't know how far he goes into this in the second one, but Gary Williams was totally, I mean, one of the statements, I can't remember it verbatim, but it was something like, don't you understand that it's possible to be like, have a redemptive covenant? Look at Israel's covenant. Look at the way they were all redemptive. I mean, we could be redemptive and yet not get in the way of the person and work of Christ and so forth. Well, I mean, that is just, that's like the cardinal sin in anything Klein is saying, because that's neglecting the republication idea or the intrusion element, and that Israel's unique and off the table in terms of anything we're supposed to be copying. So if there is any talk about the way that Israel can do this and therefore we can do this, you have to deal not only with the covenant works, but of the Mosaic covenant as an intrusion, as a republication. You have to, it's a big subject, but you got to go there, right? If you're going to critique Van Drunen, because he does rely on that idea as well as part of the system. So Noah fits into that system. And then third, you have to, of course, talk about, the Pactum Salutis and the way that works out in the covenant of grace with Christ as the head of the church, now fulfilling the dominion mandate, which is, you've got very compelling things going on with Christ actually doing dominion. When he's coming and kicking out demons and having dominion over earth and skies, so to speak, he is doing what really Adam is supposed to do there, and he is bringing into the world a new humanity via being, just thinking about this morning, this talk that he had with Nicodemus, where he's like, listen, if you're not born from above, you're not going to see the kingdom of God. And so there's this idea of a rebirth, a bringing into the world again, along with a complete dominion. So you have to reference that. You have to talk about that. Otherwise, it just doesn't, it's just the water off a duck's back to anyone that's listening to, who's sold out on that system. So I don't know why I'm helping people who want to critique Klein, but there we go. That's what you have to do. And then the two subpoints. If I could just bring out the two subpoints quick, and then I'll stop talking for a while. You have to talk about the definition of the kingdom. You can't, that word just gets thrown around, and I think it's kind of a subpoint of the covenant of grace idea, in that, is the kingdom some sort of merge of what this is now, and with the redemptive kingdom? Well, okay, that's going to matter. Or if the kingdom equals the new creation, then, again, that's very lucid. That's obviously everyone's, I think that's such a helpful point, because if the kingdom is the new creation, then even the term redemption, as long as we mean we're not bringing in the kingdom, which I can't imagine anyone sane would say, then we're almost saying the same thing. And it sounded like that was happening in that critique again. It came down to semantic.
And that's also using the word redemptive in a very, very, very broad way.
So if redemption, exactly, if redemption means like you're actually bringing about the eschaton intruded into this current world, which is obviously only happening in regeneration, then, I mean, who's going to fight that point? But if the kingdom means something different, if redemption means something different, then you're working on semantics, and we might be agreeing at some level, and it's just kind of turns into a ridiculous talk. So that's that. And then, of course, the final point, which I detected coming through in a lot of what he was saying there, is, well, he didn't say it explicitly, but the possibility, and I've seen this, I'm working off 1,000 critiques that I've looked at, is the role of grace in law, right? The role of in other words, if you think about a guy like Frame, for example, or any functional mono-covenantalist, he's basically going to go, in every covenant, God gives grace, and we produce works that bring about blessings, and that just looks different in different phases. So Israel, that, as God brought him out of the land, that's the grace
regulated by law.
Constituted and regulated, exactly. So and then you've just got to produce those works of obedience based on grace, and then you're blessed or cursed as a result, because it's just a blessing to walk in the ways of the Lord, and it's just really not good. You just
basically congruent merit, but there you go.
Right, exactly. So you've got that's coming through in a lot of Reformed theology. I mean, that's like a big thing. That's a normal approach in some circles. And so what is the deal with grace before the fall? Is there grace before the fall? Is it demerited favor? Is it, all of those questions become key as you try and process this. So what am I saying? I mean, leaving aside the issue of exegesis of the Noahic covenant, which I think, one of the most compelling arguments I've seen for this is Miles Van Pelt's thing in the new Covenant Theology book that came out with all those essays, which if we're able, I'd like to come back on and do some talking through a lot of those essays together. But just really amazing, just taking everything Klein has said and everything everyone has said and just kind of working through it at an exegetical level, saying things like, listen, you've got very lucid differences here. When Noah is talking about, when God is talking to Noah prior to the flood, he's using singular personal pronouns. Whereas afterwards, it's definite. It's all plural.
Plural.
So we just have different things there, just based on the pure exegesis of the text. You can't ignore that. And then secondly, obviously, you got the remembrance thing. God is bringing to remembrance different substantial things. So either he's remembering the covenant of grace, which leads to salvation very clearly in Noah's case, or he's remembering what he's promised to preserve. So you have to, there's a big exegetical case to be made. So you can go exegesis if you want, but you just have to go there carefully. And it's not compelling otherwise. You have to look at it properly. So those are some initial, just kind of knee-jerk thoughts. Which, I mean, I imagine if Gary Williams was listening to this, he'd be like, "What the heck? Yeah, you haven't even given me the time of day." And I would hear that, and I'm not trying to, but I'm just almost taking his argument as a bit of a springboard for the millions of bad arguments I've heard, just to try and help anyone listening to this as they process the millions of blog posts or whatever anyone has to say about Klein. Just ask those questions. Ask those, where does Noah fit in your system? Is essentially a brilliant question to ask. And it helps you to get to some clarity on the issue.
That's good.
Any other thoughts?
I think, I agree with that, because I think that one of the most difficult things for me to get my head around with this whole system was the relationship of Adam to Noah. And kind of, you start getting into, my sort of journey was from coming at it from a more sort of, into systematics, then got into biblical theology. And so I was, very keen on tracing out this thing, and you see this whole kind of idea of Noah doing what Adam, and it seems so clear. And so, at that level, it was kind of difficult. I remember having a couple of conversations with you, Mike, where I was like, well, I'm not talking about, you're like, well, no, that can't be about Adam, because Adam was Adam. And I'm like, well, I'm talking about Noah, and there's kind of the same thing going on here. And so I think you're right. I think placing Noah and his relationship to Adam is probably the one that for me was hardest to get my head around. But I think probably is going to help people to fairly understand.
So, for example, I mean, you've got Adam, who's got this task of total mastery, right? And we can come back to the exegesis there on in terms of what that means exactly, what he was tasked to do. But I would argue it's total mastery that he was supposed to have, right? Now, just the reality of death does not allow for it. This is the significance of the curse. Right? We can't have total mastery over the creation. It has mastery over us. It's an inversion of dominion. We go into the earth. We don't master the earth. The earth masters us in that sense. And, just by virtue of the fact that the fall is still in place, and you see that as Noah gets drunk, like straight after this typological new creation. Yes, there are remnants of Adam, but as Klein says, in a refracted sense, only does the dominion mandate get reissued. It's the same thing, but to ameliorative, preservative ends, penultimate ends, rather than eschatological ends. Is it connected to redemption? Of course, it subserves redemption, as I think Gary Williams did bring out. Of our position, it subserves redemption in that it allows for a humanity to save. It allows for the Savior to come. It allows the program of God to go forward, and us not to build Babel and kill ourselves and strangle ourselves before we even begin. But those are different ends ultimately. And so I appreciated the point also that we do have a dominion mandate. And it's a point that Klein is big on. He's emphatic that we must master the atoms, as he says. But this is
not in the same way Adam did.
Not to bring in the eschaton, not with a promise. And one of the things I tried to bring out in one of my chapters on the dissertation was the way that the rainbow and the Sabbath sign need to be contrasted. You've got the rainbow, which is this beautiful sort of oath stance of God preserving creation and so forth, and echoing that first creation. Whereas there's no Sabbath. As Klein points out, there's no Sabbath promise at the Noahic covenant. There's no promise of eschaton. There's no promise of the seventh day, which again, as we reflect on the initial covenant with Adam, is really important, because the whole climactic moment of that opening narrative, in the first parts of Genesis 2, is this unending day, this reality of the Sabbath, this this time that God rests and calls us into that same Sabbath rest. This is the whole premise behind Hebrews. So, the fact that that's just completely omitted, over and above the fact that we can't get mastery anyway, we can't bring in a new humanity. We can't bring in, we can't have total mastery. You can't do what Adam was supposed to do, even if there are similarities. That's just the bottom line. It makes perfect sense then that we don't have a Sabbath promise. But who does have a Sabbath promise? Where is that Sabbath fulfilled? Well, Jesus very clearly does fulfill that by his dominion and bringing into the earth a new populace. So, it's a very lucid system when you map it out like that. But, you've got to, it's just that big picture that you've got to be holding out all the time. And
maybe just a comment. The thing that stuck out for me as I was listening to him, one of the questions that he asked, because he was trying to set up a parity between Adam and Noah. Adam had dominion, and then their language was repeated after the flood, seemingly to recapitulate the dominion mandate, making an argument for a redemptive dominion kingdom moving forward. And so he put the question this way: how do you get to be a new Adam? And he sort of put that question out there to show that, as you read the reissuing of the so-called dominion mandate, that Noah is being set up in that role. And so I just quickly opened up 1 Corinthians 15, because in one sense there are lots of people who seem to typify Adam as they point forward to Christ.
Right.
There's certainly a typological way in which people echo Adam.
Yes.
There's another way in which there's only two Adams.
Exactly.
And just to highlight the fact that the Bible speaks of two, 1 Corinthians 15 verse 47 says, the first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. So technically speaking, there are only two men. There are only two Adams in that particular sense. So as I was listening to his talk, and he was talking about Noah wanting to be another Adam, he was missing what the original Adam was, and how Christ must be the second man.
Yeah. And that's missing federalism, at a basic level, at some level.
Yeah.
Did you catch when he mentioned that Noah is the head of the church?
Yes.
Did you catch
I missed that. Yeah.
I was like, okay, but there is, and that would be part of this whole thing, that it's just kind of
Christ is the head of the church.
Exactly. I'm like, we'll leave that for another episode, but it's just, I mean, stuff like that comes out of monocovenantalism.
Oh wait, I know what you mean. Yeah, I thought he was just going in terms of he was the kind of patriarch at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's typically it.
That's because he's mixing the two kingdoms.
The
head of government, head of church.
Yeah. Call it my crypto dispensationalism, but I'm not even
about the
a
ark,
fan.
wasn't he? That was in the context of the ark, wasn't
I know. So what you got to do though is you got to go like, firstly, because it's not the church. Like, I mean, I don't even like talking like that, right? Maybe it's the Baptist in me, maybe it's the crypto dispensationalist in me, but I am just not down with going, yeah, well, like, look, theocratic Israel is the church. It's just not true. The remnant was the church. That's fine. But, so you got to just qualify it in some way. True Israel. So, like, Noah himself was obviously a believer. That's fine. Was Ham a believer? I don't know. He does become the seed of the serpent and Canaan afterwards. So, there's that. But basically, you just got to go, listen, what are we talking? Do we mean like visible? Do we mean like, what do we mean? And so when you make statements like the vicar of Christ, or the head of the church in Old or New Testament, you've just got to qualify that. It's a big statement. Got to tell us what you mean.
What do you mean?
Especially when you're dissing Van Drunen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I forgot what I was going to say now. It was profound, but it's totally flowed out.
I'm sure.
I'm
sure. Yeah, I feel it. Yeah. All right. I think that must be that must be the end then. You're starting to forget stuff.
Yeah, I think it is important to say that we're not doing a detailed critique of Gary Williams' talk.
Yeah.
And
so Gary, if you're listening right now, we should get Gary on.
He won't be.
You should get, hey bro, don't be so sure of that. It is the internet after all, Maybe we should throw James White's name in there. get some press, and then
James White.
yeah.
Well, we were going to do James.
We were going to do
That's
that,
what we were going to do. But his
all right.
talk
So
was to,
maybe what we'll do is
Have we done anything on the vaccines yet?
I think so, maybe. But hang on. So there was a comment in our comment thing when Andrea and I were talking about where is the lockdown line. This is kind of related, so I'll just throw this in here as a little appendix. Hey, let's see, engage with James White. So we looked at it, and to be honest, we were all a little bit like, I don't know that we disagree with anything he's saying. To be honest, like it just sounded like, okay, cool. And then all of a sudden it turned into face masks. And so
turned into the American context and the American debate.
And I don't really care what you do with your face mask.
It's like only submit to the government when they're not telling you to disobey God, which is like what we've all been taught since as long as we've been in the church.
No one disagrees with that.
So that's why you shouldn't wear face masks. And that's just that. I mean, I just didn't see that coming.
Just to give all props to James White. I mean, dude, no matter how much I shudder at the thought of having a conversation with James White. He knows his stuff. He is one of my heroes in terms of I love the way he handles the text. So James, please don't shout at me if you're listening to this. But it's just
He's
like why even? And I suppose we were hoping for something really exciting because there's rumors that he's gone theonomist.
And he had the whiteboard out and he was doing the whole thing,
And so we all like jumped on like, whoa,
so
theonomy,
I was expecting
like
something very controversial.
Totally. And it ended up very, anyway. So but bottom line is, if you're wondering how we interact with that, it was just fine. We just agree with it. So anyway.
Something more meatier to engage with.
Yeah, we'll wait. We'll wait till we take James on. We might even get him on. And we'll let Nick handle it. I'll be absent.
I'll just turn my video off.
Just hide. Cool. Alrighty. So anyway, bottom line, talking about Gary Williams as well, I think, here's my suspicion. I would actually, true story, if that talk continued to go the way it did, I would like to talk to him personally and have him on if he was willing. But just to because I actually think that we would actually end up agreeing with so much that just because that ends up being semantics. Based on, and that would be my hope anyway, that he's misunderstood a few things or just has not taken them into account. We're coming at it, we're using different terminology, different sharp edges, but ultimately we're rounding it off to the same point. Very close anyway, enough to be able to live with. Yeah.
I remember my point from earlier.
Oh.
It was that I would have liked him to engage, and I don't know, we're wrapping up here, but I would have liked him to engage more with the relationship of the kind of two covenants happening within Noah. So you have a redemptive covenant and a common grace covenant. And he did acknowledge that was a thing, but I didn't really feel, I think it was in the second talk that he acknowledged it, but I didn't
Well,
really
he acknowledged two covenants, but only to make his point. At least in the first lecture.
It was in the second thing he references. But even then, I don't think he went as far as saying, I mean, I might be wrong. I'm drawing from memory, but I don't think he went as far as saying that there were actually two covenants, with a redemptive covenant and a common grace covenant. But he did acknowledge that those two dynamics were there in Van Drunen. But I didn't feel like he really engaged with it, and I thought that was a real shame actually, because I felt like a lot of the objections that he was making would have actually been answered by that factoring in, because it seemed like you're saying, but obviously there's something redemptive here, and at that point I was saying, well, yeah, there is obviously something redemptive there, but that isn't the same as saying that there's not a common grace covenant being made with Noah.
Well, it is crazy, because if he's saying that, and this is the thing, that it is a redemptive covenant that gets kind of expanded upon after the flood with the common grace covenant, then what are we saying actually? Is this do we get to bring the kingdom in? Do we get to redeem things to the point of, are you willing to go to that end result? Or, what? And it's usually in that.
He opened by saying he is critical of transformationalism. So
right.
It would be
so he probably has a few angles there, which is why I say it gets down to the semantic thing. But hey, he's in your country, Andre. Go get him.
He is. That is
go get him. Just go talk to him. Say, hey, Gary.
I got to fetch him. Yeah.
Go fetch him.
Gaza.
Oh man, so we love you, Gary, and Pastors Academy is amazing. Keep going.
Yeah, I still want to go there. So if you want to swing a scholarship my way,
Seriously, we might even just ditch this whole Klein thing and just,
yeah,
come
for
along.
money, for enough money.